Further debate? Further debate? Further debate? We have the member for Don Valley East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm deeply humbled to rise before all of you, my esteemed colleagues, in this truly august chamber to deliver my inaugural remarks as the Member of Provincial Parliament for Don Valley East. Madam Speaker, I thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And I invite everyone to take a moment and look around us. I can't help but admire the richly stained wood making up our desks, these beautiful golden clips, the silent and busy, industrious army of young legislative pages. Thank you for all your service, by the way, on this last day of yours. We sit amongst intricate carvings, rich tapestries, beautiful murals. And when we're done here, I'll retire to my office, which has 17-foot ceilings and, frankly, a comical number of new computers that just keep getting delivered by IT services. This is very real for us, and yet it is not reality for Ontario. The average income in our province is $52,600. That number is influenced, of course, by people like us who make well over $100,000. If you take everyone in the province and rank them from lowest income to highest income, and you split that right down the middle, the median income for our population is $39,100. And so in this beautiful chamber, we are insulated from that reality, but I hope that we will never forget it. I know that I can't. I'm the first child of immigrants from families that have taken, quite frankly, the scenic route to this country by traveling over a few generations from India to East Africa, then to the United Kingdom, and finally, ultimately, to Canada. With our family having endured so much hardship along the way, I've been raised to look out for and defend those who, like ourselves in the past, hadn't enjoyed much privilege. Growing up, my parents weren't sure what I would be good at, and so they signed me up for everything in the hopes that something would stick. I always put my heart and soul into everything, but never really found anything that I was truly exceptional at. For example, placed in Little League Baseball, I was always relegated to the deep outfield. In soccer, I was always given some token minutes of field time, but otherwise busied myself with eating orange slices on the side. I was bullied in school and therefore dutifully put in martial arts. I earned a black belt. However, my strongest scores on my black belt tests were not in sparring or patterns, but on the essay that I had to write, because I was and continue to be an academic. I eventually earned a pilot license, but was threatened with failure multiple times for various reasons, including poor eye-hand coordination and a tendency to taxi my Cessna 150 above the speed limit every single time. These experiences and others taught me a few things. I learned about hard work and perseverance. I learned about how much people struggle, even if outwardly it looks like they have everything under control. And I discovered that my calling was to help others who, like myself, may not always have fit in or needed a little bit of extra help. Coupled with my interest in science, this led me to my career in medicine. I studied medicine at the University of Toronto, just across the street from here. It's actually amusing to think how many times I've cut across the south driveway over here because I was running late for class. I eventually earned dual qualifications in family medicine and emergency medicine, and started my career going to the places where help was needed the most, serving rural and remote communities, especially Indigenous communities, in Northern Ontario, the Northwest Territories, and in the Canadian Arctic. I delivered babies, admitted inpatients, worked in emergency departments, and at one point was a sole physician providing 24/7 coverage for multiple consecutive weeks in a community that was 40,000 square kilometers. I've transported gunshot victims on air ambulances, performed emergency surgery alone in nursing stations, and one time even received the gift of a polar bear skull after saving the life of an Indigenous matriarch in a remote community. And while all of this has been rewarding, I always felt that the need for help exceeded what I could offer, and that I was never addressing the root causes of my patients' illnesses. For example, on far too many occasions, I've treated a troubled, suicidal Indigenous youth in the emergency department, provided counseling, medications, only to discharge them back into the same homelessness, poverty, and intergenerational trauma that made them suicidal in the first place. I've seen growing health impacts of climate change through the increased prevalence of heat-related medical emergencies, of increasing respiratory illnesses from air pollution caused by forest fires, and the growing prevalence of tick-borne illnesses like Lyme disease. I've seen people come to the emergency department on a regular basis because they have nowhere to sleep or nothing to eat. And I've seen kids come to the ER because they've developed eating disorders from the stress of this pandemic and because they had no mental health worker to see them. These experiences made me want to do more. In 2017, I took a sabbatical from my medical work and studied public policy at the University of Oxford. My goal was to learn economics, law, and political science so that I could implement pragmatic policy solutions to the social policy problems I saw unfolding instead of just complaining about them. And I hope that in this chamber you will find that my criticism always intends to be constructive, helpful, and well-intentioned. The pandemic struck soon after I returned from Oxford, and alongside my work as an emergency doctor in Toronto, I became the medical director of 11 COVID isolation shelters for homeless people in Toronto. I had the privilege of overseeing the work of nurses, nurse practitioners, family doctors, psychiatrists, and addiction specialists. And I have no doubt that our work saved countless lives by managing outbreaks and fighting the opioid epidemic. Meanwhile, I dealt with COVID patients in the ER and fought for disadvantaged communities in Toronto to get vaccinated. But there is always still more work to be done. And so I embarked on this career where I count myself so fortunate to stand in your midst, amongst all of your illustrious ranks, to join each of you in the fight for a better province. Now, it is clear by now that I have only just become a political person, and so I needed a lot of help to get here. I would like to thank my wife, Salima, and our darling puppy, Petunia Wigglebottom. She's a 2.5-year-old golden retriever Cocker Spaniel mix that we love, frankly, too much because, unfortunately, my wife and I can't have children. And by the way, as evidence I'm a political novice, I would like to point out that Petunia has a better Instagram account than I do. I'd like to thank my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law who have been there for me physically and emotionally before, during, and now even after the campaign. And I would like to thank the best damn campaign team that anyone could possibly hope for, including incredible volunteers and very generous donors. All of them have been kind, patient, incredibly hardworking, and so tolerant of my political naivete. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the past MPP for my riding, Michael Cotto, and his lovely wife, Lori. He's a former minister from this legislature, and we are honored to have him continue his public service now as a federal member in Ottawa. I simply couldn't be here without him. I hope that I can continue in his tradition of fighting for those of us who are most vulnerable, as he exemplified when he passed his landmark legislation, Bill 89, that increased protections for minors. And now a word about my riding, Don Valley East. It is a riding that is the very microcosm of what makes our province so great. In Don Valley East, we are profoundly diverse and multicultural, with a vibrant sense of community, along with unmatched resilience in the face of no shortage of struggles. We have outstanding shopping, world-class museums, sprawling greenery, and a majestic ravine ecosystem. To represent this community is the greatest privilege of my life, and I thank the voters for placing their trust in me. I will never stop fighting and championing your needs. In my final moments, I would like to acknowledge that I have so much to learn from every single one of you. I wonder if, in return, in anticipation of that, I may try to return the favor by offering a few suggestions of my own, drawing upon my clinical experience. I would first like to share my firm conviction that all policy is health policy. When I say this, what I mean is that we can't achieve our physical, emotional, and social well-being until we have addressed things like proper education, housing, affordability, and a better environment. Healthcare needs, of course, nurses, doctors, and hospitals, but it isn't just about those things. Second, I hope that the decisions in this room can be guided by evidence and data. My colleague from Kingston and the Islands spoke last week of his commitment to the scientific method. And in that same spirit, I hope that our decisions can be guided by intellectual curiosity and a rigorous devotion to data where and when it is available. In medicine, following the evidence has often taken me in surprising directions that have challenged my preconceived notions. And it is by following the evidence that I've come to understand empirically that healthcare should be about patients and not profits. And third, in this chamber, I hope that we can be courageous in choosing the right solutions and not just the easy ones. As politicians, we are often asked to defend the most visible or immediate consequences of a particular policy, when it is the later consequences that will be the ones that have the greatest or most lasting impact. And for example, an adequate number of paid sick days is an example where there may be an upfront cost that some of us might balk at, but for which the later economic benefits in prevented outbreaks and decreased healthcare utilization could actually save more money. Many people have wondered why I, a physician, would propose to step away from a clinical career to serve in elected office. At its core, medicine and politics are fundamentally about the same thing. They are about helping people. The difference is in the tools that we use to accomplish this and on the scale with which we can have that impact. And so fundamentally, I am here for the same reason that all of you are here. There are 15 million people in this province that need us, and I want to join you in fighting for every single one of them. And so I thank you for welcoming me amongst your ranks.
Questions and answers. The Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to first off congratulate the member on his election and such a great maiden speech. I also want to thank the member. I was one of the member's first patients here in the legislature, which I don't think he was expecting. So thank you for that. But across to the member from Don Valley East, you talk about people outside looking in. How do we go about making Ontario more inclusive, where people from all walks of society feel welcomed? And I know you spoke about that at the beginning, and I'd just like you to elaborate for the House on that.
Response from the member for Don Valley East.
I sincerely appreciate the question from the minister, and I'll begin by saying that as a physician, every member has a right to patient-physician confidentiality, and I admire you for acknowledging me publicly, but it is my pleasure to serve both in a political capacity and, of course, if my services are ever required, in a clinical capacity as well. One of the things that I hope to bring forward as a physician in this legislature is the fact that I have a unique privilege that when serving in the emergency department, my patients tell me things that they don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing with other people because of stigma, because of things that have happened to them in the past. And I hope when I rise in this chamber that I can amplify those voices and tell those stories. And I would humbly ask if you would join me in listening, in helping me to amplify those voices as well, so that we can fight for every single person in this province, not just the ones who can be the most vocal. And so certainly that is one thing I would hope for. Thank you.
Question? The member for Spadina, Fort York.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the member from Don Valley East. It's a real pleasure to listen to your inaugural speech, and it was also, I want to thank you for your service to the community, especially to the most vulnerable in the community. And I want you to ask you to expand on a couple things you said. You talked about serving First Nations community members who were, and then providing some care and then sending them back to the conditions that led them to need the care. And you also talked about serving people experiencing homelessness through the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit more about, excuse me, about how an investment in preventing that kind of crisis, housing situation, that kind of crisis, can actually, benefit us as a broader society and benefit our economy.
Response?
Thank you very much, sir. It's so fascinating that working in the emergency department, be it here in urban downtown Toronto or in an Indigenous community in Northern Ontario or the Northwest Territories, the ER functions as a safety net for society, and it pulls back the curtains on all of the ways that government works and far too often all of the ways that government does not work. A close friend of mine just shared with me an account just last week of a young woman who had passed out. And so she came to the emergency department. And it cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just to register someone in the emergency department to ensure that it's adequately staffed, to pay for the services that are provided. And ultimately, after the consultation was complete, the reason that she had passed out was because she hadn't been able to eat that morning. She couldn't afford to do it. Stories like this remind me that upfront investments in things like, sir, you spoke about food insecurity earlier. Investments in things like housing, in food, in making sure that disabled people can access the services that they need, can have profound and massive impacts on their long-term quality of life.
The member for Oakville?
And thank you to the member opposite for your inaugural speech. It was very good, so congratulations. Welcome to the House, and thank you for all your medical service. I really do appreciate it. And, you did talk a little bit about amplifying voices and listening, and I think that's important. And for those that don't know, here in the legislature, above us, which the government is looking at, is the OWL, which is for us to make sure we are wise in decisions we make. And on this side is the Eagle, which is looking at generally the opposition and a few of our government members, because we have so many, but to look to ensure that we are held to account and you keep an eye on us as a government. So we're certainly here to listen, to work with the opposition. I just wanted to make that point. But what I'd like to hear about from you is a little bit about your riding and some of the highlights and attractions to your riding. I always like to learn about different ridings in the province, so maybe you could highlight a few great places we should visit in your riding.
Response?
Thank you so much. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to speak about my riding. Perhaps one of the things that I admire the most about it, and it's not a physical, I wouldn't call it a physical attraction, but one of the things that is unmistakable as you come through the riding is just the incredible diversity and multiculturalism. We have people in the north of my riding that have lived in Don Valley East, for many generations, and then in the south of our riding, we have people who have literally just arrived and bring incredible stories about the lives that they've lived elsewhere around the world, bring so many different kinds of celebrations, religions, languages, and it is a vibrancy that one can feel as you literally come into the boundaries of our riding. Now, of course, I had alluded to other things. I truly admire our world-class museums. We have the famed Ontario Science Centre. We recently were fortunate to get a new museum, the Aga Khan Museum, which is a bastion of celebrating multiculturalism, and
Response?
Sure, and it has proven to be a place of community and sharing new things. So we certainly have that. We have incredible amounts we have a fair amount of shopping, and then what I admire the most is our incredible greenery as well, and the opportunity to run, bike, and do all sorts of things.
Question? I recognize the member from Algoma, Manitoulin.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to congratulate the member for Don Valley West on your inaugural speech. And you're going to have to get used to the responses are very quick, and a minute goes by real fast. So do that. I also want to let him know that I don't know what style you practice in karate, but I practice Wadokai. I got to my blue belt. I'd love to see you on a dojo. And I'm also really happy that I have backup, because it's been known that I've saved a couple of lives here in the park. So I'm glad that you're here and I can turn to you. I was so impressed listening to you and your background, and the reason why is being a Northern member, one of the biggest struggles that we have in Northern Ontario is the recruitment, retainment, and getting doctors into our communities, particularly for primary care. Primary care is one of those things that can save a lot of the congestions, the hallway medicine that we see in our hospitals. I was wondering if the member can tell me in a very short minute that he's going to have, what do we need to do? What are the benefits first of having doctors performing primary care in northern communities? But what can we do? What is the 30-second elevator version of what we need to recruiting and retaining doctors and getting them to our northern Ontario communities?
Response?
Sir, a few things. So certainly 15% of us in Ontario don't have a family doctor. And without the ability to have access to good and rapid primary care, we can't address things when they are minor, when they are minor issues and when they can be dealt with, if you're in a northern community without having to get shipped out of that, transferred out of that community, see specialists or get, sophisticated tests. So we need to do everything in our power to recruit and retain more primary care physicians. One of the things that has come up in a previous government was Health Force Ontario, a public sector marketing and recruiting firm that in fact has been very successful in bringing family doctors into northern regions, both in the summer and throughout the rest, through the rest of the year. I would encourage more public sector initiatives like that, and then to continue celebrating the stories of so many of the incredible family doctors who have worked and inspire all of us in medicine.
We have time for one quick question. I recognize the member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you, Speaker. I am pleased and honoured to stand in this 43rd Parliament of Ontario and make my inaugural address. Oh, I thought she called me to go. I'll start again.
Response?
I have a question.
Response? The member from Don Valley East, response?
Oh.
His inaugural address momentarily.
Nicely done.